My name's Marvin Califer. I'm a physician. I've been practicing for many years. I trained as an OBGYN, did that for about 24 years, and then went specifically to clinical trial research. And I've been doing that for the last 18, 19 years. Doing clinical research, basically, patients on the one hand, pharmaceutical companies on the other, with medications that are on their path to being approved by the government. So the work is very detailed, comprehensive, and we do a lot of things to ensure safety and efficacy because we're working with experimental medication, investigative medication. This is a good way to get more specific and better medications out there.
So, when did you originally decide that you wanted to be a physician? And then also, at what point did you decide you wanted to go down the clinical research path?
Well, I think from the time I was a young boy, I had the desire to be a physician. I always thought it would be kind of cool to help make sick people well. And then when you did obstetrics and gynecology, you had quite an opportunity to see families at a unique time in their life. You were able to practice medicine. The surgical area was quite defined, and you felt pretty comfortable being on call and dealing with any gynecological or obstetrical problem. Then I decided to switch gears since the language of medicine is the same. And I was getting older. We had a Marissa on the way, so I wanted to be more involved in her formation and started to do clinical research more intensively, probably about 19 years ago. It's kind of nice to be involved in medical research that you see kind of progressing and improving the lives of individuals. For example, we do a lot of work with Alzheimer's disease. It's a very debilitating, widespread problem. And there isn't very much in our armamentarium to treat these people. So whenever we have a new study, we're always very hopeful that this might be the key to success.
So, when were you first exposed to research, and how did that play into a career as a physician?
Well, I think my first real exposure with medication was when I was in residency doing obstetrics and gynecology. And they wanted some new formulation for medication to be used when a woman has an episiotomy. An episiotomy is a surgical incision that's made to ease out the baby as it's going through the birth canal. It would be nice to have an agent that would soothe that discomfort and accelerate healing. So I was involved with a pharmaceutical company that was dealing with that. And that was back in 1977. So it laid the groundwork for more intensive studies, especially when I decided to stop OB and kind of shift gears for clinical trials.
I'm curious, did you do research as a college student?
Yes,
Yeah.
I did chemistry research. I was a fellow of the American Chemical Society, and it was just pure organic chemistry. Running reactions at crazy hours kind of gave me the impetus to maybe deliver babies at all hours of the day and night. I was pretty fortunate. I had a very good professor who was doing the research, gave me an opportunity to present the paper at the American Chemical Society national meeting in Chicago when I was about 17. Yeah, that was a long time ago. I'm 74 now.
No, that's incredible. At 17.
Yeah, it was kind of amazing. I mean, it was, and then that particular paper was published in the Journal of Organic Chemistry in February 1970. Because I was thinking of going for a PhD versus medicine. We had different things like the Vietnam War that was going on, and people were not given opportunities to pursue graduate degrees because there was mandatory conscription. When you were 18 years of age, you had to present yourself to the Selective Service Board and register. And then you got a draft number. It was like a lottery that they did. It was really amazing. They would probably never do that again. But they had these series of like ping pong balls, and they would remove one at a time, and that was the lottery. If you had a low number, there was a good chance you'd be invited to join the army. But instead, I went to medical school.
So, did the thought of going to grad school play into the reason why you wanted to do research in chemistry, or is there other reasons why you're interested in getting involved early on?
Well, I thought it was um, something that was energizing, kind of exciting, even though it was just, well, basically, it was just plain chemistry research. It was the Clemmensen reduction of 1,2 and 1,3 indane diones. They went from double bonds to single bonds and rearrangement of the benzene rings. So it was challenging and kind of a little nerdy. And I think that kind of gave me the desire to keep going on. I think I just determined that I wanted to do not organic chemistry, but medicine.
So, how do you think research helped you define your career and personal interests?
It's always good to be at the forefront of things that are dynamically changing, specifically when it comes to medications that work for diseases that were quite harmful. Clinical trials got a little bit of a boost with COVID, and I think the world population learned a lot about the importance of doing clinical trials. I think it got a little bit of a boost with recruitment because these studies are very well defined, but you have to find patients that meet the criteria for inclusion, exclusion. So each study has a screening phase, followed by a treatment phase and a post-treatment phase. In the screening phase, you ask a lot of questions, you gather information to see if the patient meets the criteria. So you do a lot of interesting things, imaging studies when it comes to things like Alzheimer's disease, and the family you get to know and meet, and they're exhausted taking care of these patients. They require so much. So it gave you a good feeling to yourself that you were helping out and doing something constructive.
And how do you think research helps develop your critical thinking and problem solving skills?
Well, I think we're always teaching. You're not doing the research alone, so you might have study coordinators, people who are involved in patient care, in the gathering of information, and you very often wind up teaching them about whether it be a disease syndrome or teaching them how to start an IV, how to draw blood, how to interview a patient, how to talk to someone when you've got to bring some bad results in. It really is a team atmosphere where we work. I really like that because the patients are very happy to deal with people that are up and cordial. And it kind of reassures that these individuals, these patients will stay in the program because the studies are usually very comprehensive and they're not of short duration. And what's nice too is I was able to use my GYN background when dealing with things like hot flashes, uterine bleeding, fibroid uterus. It's nice to kind of keep up with current trends.
And so, in what ways do you think research helps expand your knowledge and understanding of a topic?
Keeps you always learning, always becoming a student. And I think that's a good way of building on your knowledge and help guard against dementia. It's a big concern. There are like 5 to 10 million Americans with dementia of the Alzheimer type, for example. And by keeping them active and busy and yourself aware of changes in the field will help kind of insulate you. But I think it's really important that research being done. You take a look at every major pharmaceutical company, they all have works in progress. They have studies in the pipeline because without it, they would really be in trouble.
It's pretty interesting. So they have projects like basically on deck and ready to try to produce something out of it, stay afloat.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the nice things about going into medicine. You have lots of different opportunities to do different things. You can go into it if you really like surgery, if you like to talk to people. You might be a good pediatrician or psychiatrist. If you're real good with your erector set, you might be a good surgeon. Getting involved in research gives you another facet, another opportunity to coordinate that with socialization and improvement of lifestyle.
And so, can you tell us a little bit about your experiences when you're in the lab or working on these clinical trials? Kind of like from day to day basis and um, how that formulates into publications and producing the research.
Well, it's nice to be at the forefront of a lot of these studies because, for example, PET scans are in vogue nowadays and gives you an opportunity to inject the substance into patient's vein, radiopharmaceutical, and it tags on to amyloid deposits in the brain. And you might be able to have a medication that comes on board with those amyloid plaques to help dissolve it, and with the hope of improving cognition. Because it's a terrible thing to see someone who has worked their whole life, but now in their senior years, they're having a lot of difficulty with memory, taking care of themselves. And if you could have an opportunity to help them specifically, that's great. And I think sometimes when you're doing clinical trials, you might be doing it with a medication that would hopefully be an antihypertensive, but you find that that same medication may help hair growth. So you find some interesting things as an offshoot of what you're doing. But you always have to be a good listener. I think it's one of the great traits that good doctors have, because as you're listening, you're formulating a differential diagnosis. If we're sitting here and we hear hoofbeats, you might tell me, well, gee, it's probably a horse, but it could be a guy with a music box that makes it sound like a horse, or it might be a zebra. So you keep thinking. Our key to success would be education. I think a lot of our world problems come from people being myopic or short sighted or inflexible. And I think if you would put forth a great effort in helping their education, make schools beautiful, make them want to go to school, put the money that you can appropriate for better learning tools. Nowadays, with the technology, it could be possible to support computers for all kids.
Back to when you were a student studying chemistry in a lab, um, and from that research experience onto future research experiences, like up until ones that you currently work on, what were some of the benefits that you find in doing research?
I think it helps with critical thinking instead of just looking at a problem one sided. You could step back and look at it in totality, and it might help insofar as making you kind of more aware of something that could be tested or reviewed.
And did you find that research helps you network and make connections in ways that you couldn't have done doing something else?
I think so, especially, I guess, in a large population that's kind of attentive to it. it gives one the incentive to kind of learn more and become more, especially when there's a startup of a new study, you would go to an investigative meeting. And it's usually held in one of the large cities where you meet other researchers and you're able to listen and hear how they might approach a problem. And you build a rapport with them. So someone from another part of the world, it's not uncommon. I'm on the telephone every day with someone internationally or national leaders in the field who might be involved in a study. So you're asking for some advice, and they're usually very apt to work with you.
That's pretty cool, and I didn't know that actually.
Yeah,
Um,
it's kind of neat.
yeah. So the final question, um, how do you think undergraduate research prepares students for their futures?
Well, most likely, some of the best students are going into the research area. And I think if they take good advantage of it, they build certain relationships and are a driving force for change. I think it teaches you to think outside the box. I think, especially if you let yourself delve into something that you've never done before, and that helps get others interested in it. And I think that's probably the way in which technology works. New ideas, new thinking. Hopefully, we could conquer the world's problems.